Hi, and welcome to week 5 of the Mooc. As we reflect on the Pope's encyclical, The Joy of the Gospel, the theme for our final week is Encounter as Spirit-Filled Evangelizers. This week, our master teacher is sponsored by the Office of Youth Ministry, and we're invited to join them at Steubenville this summer in August. I want to thank Reverend Joe for helping us review the document in its entirety as we start Chapter 5. As a way to look at our resource for the Mooc, breaking down the encyclical to chapters was the best way to digest it all and to gain its wisdom. But the way that you summarized and reminded us that it all has been a part of the whole was really perfect, Father Joe, and we thank you for that. I'm going to go to Joe, who's going to lead us in prayer, or possibly Craig, who's manning the chat room, and who will lead us in prayer as we start this evening's panel discussion.
Thank you, Kim. Let's go ahead and begin just by taking a moment and reflecting on where we are. Just pausing for a minute in the spirit of this week's chapter. Just taking a moment of just kind of silence. So we pray, God of our journey, as you walk with the disciples on the road to Emmaus, walk with us during this learning experience. May we encounter you in the listening and the learning, in the sharing and the silence, and in your body gathered in so many places and times. We pray this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Amen. As we start this evening's conversation, I want to first go to our master teacher, who we're fortunate to have with us tonight on the panel. Father Joe is with us, and he can share some of his thoughts as he was interpreting and processing the encyclical. But one of the questions I'd like to ask you as you introduce yourself to us is, what motivated you to be a part of this learning community, and how have you felt about being involved in this Mooc experience?
Thank you so much, Kim. It's a great honor and privilege to be able to share this time with all of you. And the reason as to why I became part and involved with this Mooc session, if you will, is because being a member of NACYML, it was a way of my giving back to the community. In doing this and in reading the entire apostolic exhortation, and especially focusing on this chapter 5, it's been such a wonderful experience to hear the Holy Father's words and to try to express them and teach them in a way that people could understand. So it's been a really edifying experience.
And we're so blessed to have you with us, so thank you so much. I'd like to take an opportunity to have the rest of the panel introduce themselves. If we could start with Amy. Amy, could you share who you are and where you're located currently?
Hi, I'm Amy Mcentee, and I am the Executive Director of the National Catholic Young Adult Ministry Association. As most of you probably know, NACYML is completely volunteer-run, so my paying job is as an Assistant Director in the Office of Evangelization and Catechesis for the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and I'm just delighted to be with you tonight.
Thank you, Amy. Armando, welcome to the panel. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself and where you're currently working?
Hello, everybody. My name is Armando Cervantes. I'm currently the Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry for the Diocese of Orange, and I am also a part of the board for the National Federation of Catholic Youth Ministry.
Thank you, Armando. Chris is with us. Chris, could you share a little bit about yourself tonight?
Sure. I'm here representing the NACYML leadership team. I also wear a variety of hats in youth ministry. I'm a nationally certified youth minister. I'm adjunct faculty for the Center for Ministry Development and a consultant in educational resources for Catholic Relief Services. And I just really enjoy being part of this panel, so thanks.
Thank you, Chris. Frank, could you share a little bit about yourself and where you are in ministry?
Sure. My name is Frank Mercadante. I'm coming from the Chicago area, and I'm the Executive Director for Cultivation Ministries. I've been in youth ministry for 30-plus years, 10 as a parish youth minister, in the past 20-plus years with Cultivation Ministries, and I'm pleased and delighted to be with you this evening, too.
Thank you, Frank. And my name is Kim McMillan, and I'm a youth minister in the Archdiocese of Chicago and currently a member of the NACYML leadership team, and it's my pleasure to be with you this evening. I'm going to introduce you to Craig, who's our bridge on the panel and the chat. So Craig, would you like to introduce yourself and say a few words to us?
Sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Craig Gould, and I am the Archdiocesan Director of Youth and Young Adult Ministry in the Archdiocese of Baltimore. I know I've been on here with some of you who have been on before, have seen me every Tuesday night here at 9, so welcome back to those who are coming back. And I'll be facilitating the chat, and there's lots of different links that we'll throw up on the chat for you to be able to use. One thing to always mention, too, is that after the chat, you can continue both with the hashtag NACYML and then continue to post things and put things up there, as well as to connect through the NetSourcing learning communities after tonight. So thanks very much, and I'll see you on the chat side.
Great, thank you so much. Father Joe, the chat room already has a question, and they've liked us to direct it to you. Someone in the chat Brian in the chat, is interested in knowing some of the best practices that you can share with people on how to form people, catechetical leaders, and how to help them be people of prayer.
That's a great question. Really, that section in the Apostolic Exhortation where the Holy Father speaks about prayer and work, both. And I said the ora et labora, which is so important for us to remember. We can get so wrapped up in the work, we can get so wrapped up in the doing that we forget at times that we need to focus on the Lord, and it's about the Lord. It's totally about Him and what He's calling us to do. The way to form that is to create communities of prayer, not to be afraid to share that, and to be bold and pray and do that. And I found that so vividly in the youth ministry world. And I'm going to refer to my brother Frank Mercadante. I brought him out to do a workshop here in the Archdiocese, and actually not a workshop, lead a retreat, and he does that so well, and he engaged my youth ministers to pray with each other and not be afraid of that. I was the one who sort of held the retreat for them, but then in bringing in Frank, it was so freeing to have a lay person lead that retreat and really show them how to pray and not be afraid of it and engage it, and that's something that is so needed really for us being in the youth ministry world. So I mean, I don't know if Frank wants to add anything to that since he does it well.
Frank, would you like to add something?
I guess so. I would. I just think it's probably critical that I think people know that our first call isn't ministry. I think sometimes we think that, oh, I'm a minister and that's what I do. But I think our first call, before we were called to ministry, just like before I was ever called to marriage, I was called to relationship. And so I think it's critical that we honor our first call first, and that is build that relationship with Jesus, hold each other accountable, develop some goals in terms of spending time with the Lord, and then be in a community too, not just the alone time, but as a community to learn how to share with one another, weep with those who weep, and rejoice with those who rejoice, pray over one another, build communities that. I think that that's probably the dominant spiritual hunger of young people today is community, and if we learn how to live it in an authentic way, I think we have a lot to give to young people.
Great, thank you so much, Frank. Thanks, Father Joe, for suggesting Frank add a little bit to that as well. Armando, when we're listening to Father Joe's words and his reflection on what he read in chapter 5, and some of the Pope's suggestions for techniques for evangelizing, was there anything in particular that spoke to you?
I think there was so much stuff that you could actually take from it, but probably one of the things that that spoke to me really was this idea of not stopping we just need to be people, to be with people. We need to connect with people, and this idea of I always refer back to the Spanish word of the difference between conocer and ser, which with both means to know, But conocer goes to a deeper level of knowing someone so much more intimately. When you know a person, you never use the verb ser, which is still to know. I mean, conocer, or the challenge really is, can you go deeply in understanding someone in a way that you know them, you know their heart, and in this knowing them, that's when you really journey with them. And how do we get to the point of doing that at all moments, and not with people who come to our doors? And I think that's one of the things that Father Joe talked about that really kind of spoke to me, was this idea that it is work, and it is not easy, and it is going to require us to almost step outside of ourselves, because we're so used to opening the doors of the church and waiting for them to come in, when this this invitation is to go out and to actually see and be with people on the outside. So I think, if anything, techniques for, at least that I use and that I invite our youth ministers to do, is, can they go outside of themselves? Can they go outside of their churches? Because where it's going to happen is outside. Being with people outside. Being with people that are not necessarily inside where we are fully.
Great, thanks, Armando. Armando, I think you might need to refresh, because your speaker is giving us a little bit of problems. So maybe if you can take a really quick moment to do that. I'm going to go to Amy, and I'm going to ask Amy a similar question. Which of the techniques for evangelizing that the Pope suggested spoke specifically to you?
I think that similar to what Armando was saying, is about that connection to be with people. But more specifically, it was in paragraph 273 where he says, "I am a mission on this earth." So its mission is not just something that we do, but that we are mission. So remembering that we are called to, as it says in the paragraph, by this mission of bringing light, blessing, enlivening, raising up, healing, and freeing. And so part of that is, for me, it was one of those things where I read that and I went, ooh. But just remembering that we are called to be spirit-filled evangelizers in all that we do, not just in our jobs, but in the way that we engage people in stores and in parking lots, and to all people in the world. That's part of the mission of the church, is that we are mission, and that everything that we do is part of that evangelizing mission.
Great. Thank you, Amy. That's so true. My mother was just recently in the hospital, and she was having complications one day, and one of the women that came in to clean the room was a real fan of Our Lady of Guadalupe. So she started telling my mom she was going to pray for her, and then the next few days she checked in on my mom specifically. And I think that idea of presence wherever you are, presence whenever you encounter someone, and that really is a way to walk with people at all times. So thanks for sharing that. Chris, can I ask you a question? Is there a time in your life when you were most aware that you could evangelize, and where you could evangelize?
I think what struck me about evangelizing, because it was such a foreign word not that very long ago, was when I realized I do a lot of presenting, I do a lot of talks, and a lot of mostly teaching. I do a lot of teaching, and I do work from an outline. I don't have a written presentation. It's just an outline. And so every time before I get up to do a presentation, I do a very simple prayer to God, where I ask that it's not so much what I say that's important, but what the people hear. So help me to allow the people to hear what you want them to hear at this time. And the reason I bring that up is because my experience has been that after doing like an 8-hour class, okay, or something like that, someone will come up to me and say, "Oh, that story you told was really impactful." And I think to myself, I had no plan to tell that story. It was just as I was talking and things were coming up, and I looked out at the audience and I thought, thank you, Holy Spirit, because that was not part of my original plan. There have been times when people have told me that what impacted them most, I honest to God don't remember saying. Okay.
Right.
And so I keep thinking it's that whole thing about being an instrument of God and letting the Holy Spirit work through you. And I have been blessed to have had that happen many times in my life, and I'm sure many other people who are listening have had the same experience. And then you just become aware of how God does use you if you just allow yourself to open up to the Spirit and to do that, and to be more conscious of the people who are in front of you than of what you feel you wanted to tell them. And God will work with you to do that. And I think that's when I really became aware of evangelization as a very spirit-filled thing.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for sharing that. Craig, is there any information on the chat that you want to share, or anything that we should be addressing?
Well, first of all, people really love Chris's goggle-style headwear that she's got going on there. So she's real popular right now. But one of the things that people are saying over here is they're really impacted, and it seems like it was a technique maybe that Frank did introduce, I don't know whether it was in New York or another place, but two things. One is the technique of prayer, where he had youth ministers just sit with each other and listen to each other's stories and then pray for each other. Really personal kind of approach to prayer, and folks were really appreciated that and started to incorporate into that larger vision of what they do with their ministries. The other thing was, one of the guests shared about praying for names with young people. I think it was Cindy shared about that, and that was really impactful. Folks really enjoyed the fact that, you know, that sense of intimacy again, where you're praying not in general for things, but for actual people, and especially for young people. I think she said there's 187 young people's names that they pray for.
Wow, that's a...
And so there was a great response. Yeah, people really just feeling like that sense of setting the tone of ministry through prayer, and how really important that is.
Great, thank you so much. That is a beautiful thing, to be able to pray by name, and it means most specifically that you're holding somebody especially in your heart in prayer. Thank you. Father Joe, what do you do? We talked a little bit about being weary in faith, or being weary as we minister. What do you do when you feel weary in faith?
Just this morning, I woke up exhausted, and what I do is just I stand or kneel before the Blessed Sacrament. It's my time of prayer, and just self-emptying, if you will, and just, you know, letting God see me and me watching God back. And seriously, I mean, I've been going through some things lately, and this morning it was the first thing, you know, after brushing my teeth, I said, I just need to spend time with my Lord. So spending that quality time, you know, as Frank was mentioning, you know, to remember that you know, with all of the craziness that's going on in our world, with all of the problems and all of the things, just to remember that the most important thing is our relationship with the Lord. Another thing is personal retreat. Just last night, I was talking to a friend of mine. I was like, I need to get out of here, and I need to do my personal retreat. So prayer and retreat are critical for me personally in that, and just listening to the people around us as well. You know, listening to the community that we have, which Pope Francis alludes to in this 5th chapter. You know, he speaks so eloquently about just being in tune with our community.
Yeah.
His exact words are the spiritual savor, right, of being a people. So enjoying that and listening to brothers and sisters around us that love us. Last night I was on the phone with a friend of mine, and he just said, you know what, let's just pray. And he knew I needed that prayer. And that was powerful, because he knew I needed that, and we just prayed together on the phone. And I found that to be so true in the youth ministry community, that all my brothers and sisters, they're just so attuned, you know, and it's never, you know, hear my problems, but let me hear you. What's going on with you?
That's beautiful. Prayer and listening, so important. Armando, what do you do when you're feeling weary from work and ministry, and when weary in faith?
You know, probably about a few years ago, I kind of started switching. I was very charismatic, and I loved going to charismatic masses and charismatic prayer groups, and raising my hand, singing out loud. I'd be so excited. And now it's kind of changed. I went to a silent retreat about two years ago, and that has really changed the way I kind of listen to just God, and that's really what silent retreats help me. It's just listening. That I get strength from listening. And I was reading one specific part, 272, that said, a committed missionary knows the joy of being a spring which spills over and refreshes others. And I remember the first time that my spiritual director said that. They said, "You're so used to pouring yourself out."
Oh, I think we lost him.
And it's not about pouring yourself out. It's about it's what.
We heard you up until it's not about pouring yourself out. Was there something else that you could finish there?
No, just that it's not about pouring yourself out. It's just about having so much of the Lord and having so much joy that it's the excess of that joy that is what people learn from. And to me, that has changed profoundly the way I pray, the way I listen, and the way I just enjoy just being with people and letting them fill that up. That's what gives me that energy.
When your cup overflows, that's what people get to see. Amy, could you share a little bit with us about who helps you keep the faith?
Yeah, I have a couple of people, first of all. So number one of the things that I have found helps me to keep the faith is when I go to Mass, particularly in a place where people don't necessarily know who I am or what I do. And I am inspired by their witness of faith, and that the issues in the church that sometimes seem so complicated to me don't seem to affect them. You know, they're there to worship God and to practice their faith. So I'm inspired by anonymous people, number one. And the second one is my husband, who worked in ministry. He's has some health issues, so he's not working, but he worked in ministry before, and he had a really great way of keeping me very kind of practical. And he would say things, one of the phrases he would say to me is, when I'd be all worked up, he'd say, "Amy, this isn't television. It's not over in 30 minutes, and it's definitely not that dramatic." And so just his ability to kind of make me laugh at the absurdity of some of the things that I get all worked up on, and to recognize that really God is the one whose hand is in this. Again, just really, really powerful witness for me.
Yeah, thank you, Amy. Thanks for sharing that. Frank, there's a question in the chat with young people, grades 6 through 8, that are very shy about praying. What would you do to suggest ways to encourage them?
I wouldn't. I'm not surprised, you know, that 6th to 8th graders are a little shy about praying. So I think one, I would take it into context because of their age. I think you know, maybe a way to approach it is, you know, what about doing some things with families? I think a lot of times young people are uncomfortable praying because they don't necessarily have any kind of experience with it in everyday life. So maybe a back way of going about it is to do things with families and parents, so that parents are really comfortable with praying. And when you do it in maybe a church context, it becomes easier to take it home and to challenge them to take it home. But I think, you know, helping kids just pray at the table at home, pray with their families at home, will make it a lot easier to pray with people right at the church. So that's kind of a back approach to it that I think makes sense down the long run, and maybe something that should be happening a lot earlier than, you know, 6th or 7th grade, but something that could be integrated into our practices as a parish as a whole.
That's a great idea, and I like that you reminded us about the importance of the family and being a part of the family of faith. We don't stand alone, we stand with our families. Chris, would you like to offer a few suggestions about encouraging young people to pray?
I'm sure. I worked with junior high through high school kids for like over 30 years. And so these are just some practical hints. They're not any great mind-blowing things. First of all, they really like experiential prayer, things that have gestures, that have props, that have things like that. Not gimmicky. We're not trying to be gimmicky. Silence works really well if you get them prepared for it. But to allow them to do things that are not passive, but that they can experience. The other thing is, if you want to do spontaneous prayer, one thing that works really well is to give them a prop. So maybe they're sitting in a circle and the person holding the candle or holding a picture gets to be the person who talks. Because what happens then is everyone focuses on the prop and not on the person talking. And so that gives them a little bit more courage to say things spontaneously. And also they know when they get the prop, it's their turn to say something. I've also found that particularly with middle school kids, guided meditations work really well. They have incredible imaginations. You do have to set the stage, not really long, but you do have to set it to allow them to be quiet and to calm down and to be comfortable, but then let their imagination soar. And if you're not good at doing guided meditations, there are lots of books out there with those. But that's 3 really practical suggestions that I would give is experiential prayer, work with some props and some gestures, and try a guided meditation every now and then.
Thanks, Chris. Amy, is there a few things that you would suggest as well?
I would just kind of add to what Chris was saying in terms of experiential is giving them opportunities to explore different prayer styles, and particularly exploring them on their own where they don't necessarily have an audience. So having some opportunities where they can do some self-guided kind of prayer things that involve art and music and moving their bodies, and especially 6th through 8th grade, they're growing and they're awkward, and so making sure that we give them an experience that allows them to incorporate different things that make sense to them, but giving them room to explore them, and including being able to write, because sometimes the part that makes them shy is having to say it out loud until they realize that there are people in the room who are having those same experiences, because 6th, 7th, and 8th grade is so much about having a space to belong to and feeling like I'm not going to be made fun of because I say this thing out loud that maybe sounds better in my head than when it comes out of my mouth.
We have that problem as adults as well.
Right.
But you know what? On tagging on that, Amy, I find it really helpful to let them write a sentence or two before it's their turn to pray, so that they actually get a chance to gather their words, so that they can say something, articulate something that seemed like it makes sense to them because they wrote it down. So those are all great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Amy. Those are all great suggestions. Father, would you want to add, let's move on to some of the things that we read and some of the things that we heard, and what were some of our favorite quotes that we found in the document? Father, would you like to comment on your favorite?
Yes, sure. My most favorite quote, especially from chapter 5, is paragraph 272. And paragraph 272 is such a powerful line. I may have said this earlier, that when I was reading it, it was just so mind-blowing. I had to put the book down and just really reflect on it. And it says this. He says, "It is more blessed to give than to receive," and that's taken from Acts chapter 20, verse 35. But then he says, "We do not live better when we flee, hide, refuse to share, stop giving, and lock ourselves up in our own comforts. Such a life is nothing less than slow suicide." I mean, those words are powerful to be coming out of the mouth of our Holy Father. To say that to people, it's slow suicide when you live a narcissistic, all about me approach to life. Which is the American way, unfortunately. It seems to be, it's all about me. I got the iPhone, the iPad, me.com, and here the Holy Father is saying it's slow suicide. We're just dying away slowly. And to me, that was the most powerful line, I think, in this chapter 5. There are other powerful lines in the book, of course, but this line, I think there's so much that we can take from and share that, especially with our young people, to help them understand. Just to summarize it all, one of my most favorite lines of all the documents is Gaudium et Spes 24, which is, "It is only in truly giving of yourself that you find yourself." And I think this is the summary right here.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Thank you. Thanks for reminding us of that. I think there are so many things that speak to us all differently because of where we are and where we are in faith and where we're growing. So it's nice to have an understanding of what speaks to you today to now, what makes you stop in your tracks and really want to digest and spend time with the Word. Frank, is there something that spoke to you?
Yeah, I think one of my favorites is the paragraph 265. Pope Francis says, "We are created for what the gospel offers us." It speaks to the deepest yearnings of people's hearts. I've met some people over the years that were in sales, and I'm not saying that evangelization is sales by any means, but they had to sell some really just remote stuff. Like, you think, like, how do you find a customer for that? It must take a lot of time to find someone who'd be interested in that. What's really fascinating about the gospel is that everyone hungers for it. Everyone, this is what they truly want in their heart of hearts. They may not be able to identify it. They may not be able to articulate that. I think most teenagers aren't going to say, "I need Jesus." But the fact that they might be yearning for popularity, success, power, achievement, let alone some of the more negative things like premarital sex and drug use and so forth, I think is a clear indication that everyone is hungering for significance. And so we have really what people are looking for. We can't do it in a way that we're looking in an arrogant way that, oh, I'm better than you. I think that kind of backside, I love you, but I'm better than you because I've got this, I don't think is the right approach. But I do think that we have what people are looking for universally. It's what they hunger for.
Yeah. Thank you, Frank. We're getting some favorite quotes from the chat. A true missionary knows that Jesus walks with him, speaks to him, breathes with him, works with him. And another, the church urgently needs the deep breath of prayer. We do not live better if we lock ourselves up in our own comforts. All beautiful words that are so poignant and so important for us to hear and to sit with. Armando, is there a quote of something that you had read that really resonated with you?
The end of 274 was a really good one for me that said, "We achieve fulfillment when we break down walls and our hearts are filled with faces and names." That it's not about how many in my group or how many I have or what I've done. It's knowing someone's face and knowing someone's name that's important. And that may seem ineffective in our American society, but that's how we reach. It's these if we're really spirit-filled evangelizers, we know faces and we know names, and it's not about numbers. And that just it even makes my skin crawl because I think that's what's important.
Thank you, Armando. Yes. You know what I'm thinking? We're getting kind of close to where we're actually going to have to wrap up because that happens quickly and it takes a lot of time. And what I'd really like to suggest is that we each answer a question in regard to what is the experience of the Mooc kind of unveiled to you or uncovered to you. Just looking at the time that we've spent, 5 weeks, kind of learning about the different chapters of the document of the Pope's encyclical and trying to think about, what has this taught us? What's our take home from this? So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm just going to start over by Amy, and then we'll just briefly get a chance for us to answer that question.
Sorry, microphone. I think that participating in the Mooc has been really helpful for me to recognize the powerful and insightful and creative people that I share this ministry with, and that reading this with so many other people, and just even that action that we just did of sharing what's your favorite quote and people saying, well, this really jumped out to me and this really jumped out for me, just reminds me of how essential everyone is in the church and how essential it is that we recognize that everyone has that grace of God within them because we all highlight different things, and so the work that we do together is essential that we involve everyone in that, and again was just highlighted as we shared this document together.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you. Chris, I was going to go to you next. What is this experience of the Mooc and sharing these 5 weeks together showed you?
First of all, it's incredible to be able to meet with and to network with and to get ideas from people across the country and even in other parts of the world. And also, it was sort of exciting for me to try this as a technology to be able to do that. So that was just a little aside. But as far as what I personally got out of it was a real reminder that we are called, we are compelled to be people of passion and joy. And that we have to, that doesn't mean we all have to be extroverts or we all have to be jumping up and down all the time, but that it becomes evident that we carry that interior joy with us, okay? Enthusiasm literally means joy, spirit-filled. And to be a spirit-filled evangelizer, we need to, in quiet ways and in outgoing ways, be very enthusiastic about our faith and sharing what is most important to us, which is our relationship with Jesus to the people that we care about. I also found the Mooc highly motivating, so it was just a great experience for me.
Thanks, Chris. Frank, would you like to add something?
Sure, I would just echo just bringing so many people together, all the gifts, insights being shared is a wonderful blessing, I think, to all of us. I'm particularly pleased to see us kind of really unpack evangelization. I think that is it's so critical. I know just in light of just the recent Pew report that just came out, just how I think in many ways we're in a crisis situation, and learning how to really be the gospel to the world around us, I think, is so critical, and it's timely. So I couldn't be more pleased about the focus of this Mooc and all the great gifts.
Great, thank you. It has been a great gift to be together and to unpack it together and to be able to talk about such an important message from the Pope. Father Joe, would you like to share your experience and what you are happy to have you taking home from this experience with the 5-week Mooc?
It's been a really wonderful experience. As I said earlier, Kim, belonging to NACYML and seeing this next level that NACYML has taken it to. Being a member for the last couple of years, just by the very fact, it's a little small testimony. You know, I don't know Amy personally, but you know, I just saw her on video, and she probably doesn't even know this, but I saw her at the USCCB when I was at NDDI, and I was in the room with her, and to know that she's a NACYML member, and then to have seen her there and share that, and then be on this panel together. And the craziest part is that we've never been in the same room together, you know. But yet to know that I have Amy's support there, and that I could count on her with young adults, that's awesome. You know, to know somebody like a Frank Mercadante, to have CMD, you know, the Center for Ministry of Development, Tom East and his crew. They're just phenomenal, and it just is an amazing experience, and I mean, and just to have Armando's Armando, I mean, you know. But it really has been just to be able to speak with all of you, to share with all of you. It really has been an amazing experience, and I hope I do get to meet you someday, Amy.
It does make the world a smaller place, and we are all working for the same boss, so it's
Amen.
good to see some of the familiar faces in our ministry.
Unfortunately,
as a member,
there's a Patriot fan too, but you know, we won't talk about
we won't
him.
discuss about that now. As a member of the National Association of Catholic Youth Ministers, I just want to share and encourage everyone who's participated in the Mooc or had a chance to be a part of this learning experience to become a member of this priceless ministry-focused association. It was during a leadership team gathering that the idea was presented and brought to fruition by members of the association that recognized the power of the community and the collective wisdom and knowledge that can be gathered and brought to harvest. So I encourage you to visit the NACYML webpage, you know, become a member, participate with this group of people that are interested in ministering to the young church, but also interested in ministering to families and in all different ways to help us grow holy, Catholic, happy adults. I'm going to now thank the panel, thank the people that were present this evening sharing their wisdom on the panel for the time that they put into this particular panel. But I also want to thank all those who participated in all the panels for the past 5 weeks, and all the time that they spent kind of deciding what they were going to say and sharing their thoughts and their wisdom. Charlotte asked me to pass on specifically her thanks to Joe and the panel and everyone who entered the Mooc to facilitate, share, and learn. Thanks to the learning partners that supported this idea and to the NACYML leadership team. I'd also like to specifically thank Bishop Caggiano and Archbishop Kurz for being a part of this and bringing their wisdom and knowledge to our learning experience. I want to remind you to continue to use the Mooc content and to keep the conversations going. And now I'm going to go over to the chat where I hope Craig has a few things to add.
Thanks, Kim. I do have a few things to add. We won't bring up Father Joe's comment. I will, in my graciousness as a Christian, forgive him for that. But I do want to say that we've got a lot of good folks over here in the chat. And thanks to all those folks who have joined us, whether you've been here just for this week or you've been on all 5 weeks of the chat on the side. It's been really great. And a lot of what people have shared, Kim, on the chat has been that people are really sad that this is over, that they've really enjoyed this time of community and spiritual fellowship and being able to journey together. And so people are really looking for ways, and even there's one group that has talked about they're going to continue to meet as youth ministers. A lot of that was spawned off of this meeting together, and it kind of created a rhythm from them to be able to meet. So really just great. So a few things to throw up there for folks don't forget. As Ella's putting on the evaluations right now, and there's a link to the evaluation, the SurveyMonkey, if folks could do that and put that up, and also the webinar that's coming up tomorrow on national certification. And then, as I had mentioned in the chat before, we've got the NetSourcing learning communities and the hashtag NACYML Mooc where folks are continuing to connect. But just a thanks to all those who have done the chat, and it's been great, and we can tell from their response here, just great spiritual accompaniment for everybody.
I also wanted to remind you that just because I feel like I'm talking to confirmation candidates, just because this panel discussion is over does not mean that we've graduated. There's the whole rest of the week to go back into your learning communities and your NetSourcing communities, and there's still more information to be found and shared, and knowledge and wisdom to be shared with your community that you work with. I know myself in our parish, we've just decided that that's going to be a part of our parish transformation, to go back and watch the videos on a weekly basis with the people of the parish and have these conversations similar to the things that the panel's doing, similar to what the chat's doing, to continue all of us growing in faith. I think that we hit everything, and I just want to thank you for the time that you've invested in this. Please fill out the survey, do the evaluation, share what you especially enjoyed, become a NACYML member, nacyml.org. Thank you, and good night.